Yeah. Are you the one in there? Radio silence. The time change is so brutal. Did anyone else struggle with it today? Like, my kids were so mad. They're like, it's dark. I'm not getting up. It's dark. They're like, you're wrong. It's the wrong time. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. It's the right time. I hate this time change, right? I was complaining to my first class that like they're trying to go to bed and it's still light outside. So they think it's too like early and then they don't want to wake up because it's too dark. And like, honestly, I feel the same way. So, time change is always a little bit weird, but good to see you all. We only have a couple weeks till spring break, so it's coming. I know, hang in there, everyone. This always feels like it's like the hardest part of the semester because everyone is tired and we're all ready for a break and it's coming. But for us, it's so late. Like everybody else feels like they're having their breaks like now or already. My kids is like a whole week earlier than mine as well. So it's coming. Just know that it's on its way. We'll have kind of a lighter day too, which might maybe help a little bit. We're gonna finish up this topic and then our next topic, I usually show a film related to it. So hopefully that maybe gives you a little bit of a break. But what I want to do, I want to give you just a couple of minutes really quickly before I collect them and we talk about it. I gave you that homework assignment with the song, the Your Love Is My Drug song. And you had a few minutes to work in groups, but find a couple of people around you and just kind of maybe double check and share what you have. And then we'll talk about it together and I'll collect it. But I want to give you a few minutes real quick to check in with your classmates.
Yeah, I got that for one and say that serotonin or I put that my friends look at blog and making my judgments. Work together. But I feel like that's wrong for someone. I feel like that's wrong though. Mine. But I feel like it was kind of hard. So it was kind of hard for me to. No. I put Nora in there for me. So that. Yeah. And then I think good or something. I guess don't have a where you and decided to send it for and I also need it for yeah, I don't care.
Thank you.
It was kind of hard I did, but then when I started. So I think I didn't even know these books. I tried to show some of these. Yeah, I
right, so just like another minute, then we'll talk about it together.
Yeah. Or yeah. Yeah, that was the only place I could think of just putting in that one. Okay.
All right, so I'll collect this from you in a second here, but let's just kind of highlight a few of the things that you saw in there. And again, I think you could say like the whole song is kind of describing some of this chemistry that's going on that we talked about a lot last time. But what are some lyrics that maybe like stood out to you that you underlined or highlighted or wrote something next to that show us like some of the chemistry stuff? Anyone have one that you're willing to share? What's one that you highlighted or like underlined or whatever? Anybody? Yeah, thank you.
For adrenaline, the rush is worth the price I paid.
Yeah.
It's kind of obvious because that rush, you kind of just associate that with adrenaline.
Yeah, I love that, right? That's a great start, right? Adrenaline, that rush of excitement that you get, very connected to adrenaline or norepinephrine. What are some other ones that you might have? It doesn't have to be a different neurotransmitter, but what else did you like write down? Anything else? Want to get a few of them? Yeah, thank you.
I thought I'm addicted with the crisis and it's in dopamine.
Sure.
It's just, it feels good when you work with it.
Yeah. And the desire and reward circuit. There's a lot of examples of like dopamine stuff going on in here. Anyone have an example of like a serotonin like lyric, a lyric that maybe kind of jumped out to you for some serotonin influence? What we got? Yeah, I think.
This is adrenaline, but it might also be serotonin if it's staying up.
Sure.
That might affect sleep.
You could put it either way, right? So like that obsession and not being able to sleep, if it was like more psychological, then we could say it was like very serotonin driven of that craving and thinking about, or it could be adrenaline of like you're so up and got that rush that you can't sleep, right? It could go either way. Anybody have another lyric of any like neurotransmitter that you underlined? Those are great ones, but maybe like one or two more. Anybody else? What else do you have in there? We'll give you a minute. I'm a little tired in one day, but I want to hear what do you think? Anybody? You moved. I was gonna get excited. And it was like, I'm like, that's you. You moved. All right, one more. Somebody give me one more, and then I'll let you off the hook. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love that, right? Norepinephrine or adrenaline, heart pounding and pumping, right? This whole song, obviously, there's all these things of like being addicted, right? And the rush and the high and the craving, right? All of these things are very, very along the lines of what we tend to feel when we're falling in love with somebody or maybe in infatuation with somebody because we don't quite necessarily know them yet. So if you want to make sure your name is on there, and then you can go ahead and pass those forward, I'll come around and collect them. Anybody else? So just a couple of other little thoughts here with this chapter, and then we'll move on. But a little bit more about like a couple of other things related to falling in love and attraction. So we talked a lot about the chemistry of attraction and falling in love, but there tend to be four kind of interesting pieces that correlate very strongly with who we are drawn to and who we tend to enter into relationships and be attracted to. And they are proximity, reciprocity, similarity, and physical attractiveness. right? We tend to do better in relationships and be drawn to people that we are physically near to. Now, that seems like common sense, but like in general, when we interact with people and we live in a close proximity to them, we're more likely to enter into relationships with them. That can be affected obviously by like distance, like ways of meeting or like online dating and things like that. But the people that we see more often and interact with, we tend to be more likely to be drawn to, just by kind of like a practical standpoint there. We tend to do better with people who have reciprocity with us. Reciprocity, we can think of like balance, right? If you think about relationships, it's totally fine if sometimes one person gives a little bit more than the other, and then the other person gives a little bit more than the other later. But in general, relationships that are super lopsided don't tend to last. If one person is always giving, 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 and the other person doesn't, it doesn't always tend to work out well in the long run. Sometimes, right? But generally, relationships that are a little more balanced or people who have a little more reciprocity with each other tend to do better. We might be attracted to opposites, but people who are similar to us, we tend to last longer with. If you have similar interests or similar backgrounds or similar like belief systems, that tends to be stronger and stronger, more strongly correlated with relationship success than when we're really different. You don't have to have the same interests. You don't want to be carbon copies of each other, but if you have very different upbringings or backgrounds or religious belief systems or interests, sometimes that can be a barrier to relationships being successful and lasting. Not always, but sometimes. And we tend to do better with those that we find physically attractive. Luckily, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so we all have different standards of what we find attractive, but we tend to do better when we find someone to be attractive physically, in addition to some of the other more like psychological pieces. So these are 4 things that have like kind of come up over and over again in research related to like falling in love and attraction and relationships lasting. One other thing that the book talks about, just to kind of like wrap up, are some characteristics of high quality relationships. Right, we talked about with communication, how people could have those like 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which could signal the end of times, right, when people communicate poorly. These are things that we tend to see when we do research on couples that have lasted. Couples and relationships that have stayed together a long time tend to have good supportive communication. Communication is really important in relationships. You need to be able to talk to each other and communicate what's going on in your life. That's one that we see over and over and over again, correlating with relationship success and satisfaction. Seeing your partner as your best friend or companion. You enjoy being with your partner, right? You enjoy like doing things with them. You have enough similarity and interest to do things with them. And you tend to have what are called frequent positive interactions, just kind of building off of that. When you have a lot of positive interactions with a partner, it builds more positivity, right? So having fun together or laughing together or doing things you enjoy together, having realistic expectations and shared interests, right? I saw, it was like a meme and it was like, love, honor, and lower your expectations, right? That sometimes our expectations can create problems for us if they're not realistic, that you can face and deal with conflict together. Fighting isn't necessarily bad, right? Having a fight isn't the like end of the world. It's how you navigate through that fight and maybe learn from it or deal with that conflict and grow together. And then having sexual expression and variety, if that's something that's important to you in a relationship, can also be a key piece, right? If it's a relationship where you are engaging in sexuality. So these are some things that we see over and over again as being like higher quality items that show up in relationships that last. But again, a lot of pieces of like love and communication and intimacy. And where we go from here is we look at like adult and like adolescent sexuality and childhood sexuality. And so what I normally do for that unit is actually show a film, which I mentioned, and then we'll talk about some of it a little bit more like afterward. But I'm going to show you a film to kind of bring in this, and then chapter 3, and then chapters 8 and 9. It's a little bit older at this point, it's starting to get older. But I think it's a wonderful way to look at gendered stereotypes, communication patterns, and relationships. Right? I wish it had a little more diversity in relationships, but could be worse. So I'm going to show you the movie He's Just Not That Into You. and I'm sure some of you have seen it before. I won't say it's my type of movie, but it's not an awful movie, right, to watch. There's a lot of really like dynamic characters in it. So what we'll do for the rest of today, and then it'll also lead us into next class, is we'll watch this film, and I'm gonna give you a worksheet to fill out with it. And I'll collect this after we talk about it in a couple of classes. And it's not like one of those, like what happened in 3 minutes in, it's like more kind of reflecting and looking for signs and things that they talk about in the film and that you're confused. But definitely be working on this during the movie. I don't want this to be homework for you. It really shouldn't be. So it should be something you can fill out as we go along. And I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen this before, but hopefully watching it through different lenses. Okay.